Sergio Di Parini, the reporter for this module titled Gender. What is gender, and do you think it plays a role in international relations? If so, how? Feminist defines gender. In gender usage, gender denotes the biological sex of individuals. However, feminists define gender differently as a set of socially and culturally constructed characteristics that vary across time and place. When we think of characteristics such as power, autonomy, rationality, and public, we associate them with masculinity or what it means to be a real man. Opposite characteristics such as weakness, dependence, connection, emotionality, and private are associated with femininity. Studies have shown that both women and men assign a more positive value to masculine characteristics. This definition of masculinity and femininity are rational, which means that they depend on each other for their meaning. In other words, what it means to be a real man is not to display womanly weaknesses. Since these characteristics are social constructions, not biological ones, it is quite possible for women, particularly those in powerful positions like former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice or former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, to appear to act like a real man. In fact, certain feminists have argued that such behavior is necessary for both women and men to succeed in the tough world of international policy making. Sometimes gender is thought to be synonymous with women, but feminists believe that gender is as much about men in masculinity as it is about women. Since at the top level, international politics is a masculine world, it is particularly important to pay attention to various forms of masculinity that are often used to legitimate state, foreign, and military policies. For example, characteristics such as power, autonomy, and rationality, which we have identified as masculine, are also characteristics that are most valued in states for foreign policies. Feminist approach to IR. Liberal feminism. Liberal feminism document various aspects of women's subordination. They have investigated problems of refugee women, income inequalities between women and men, and the kinds of human rights violation incurred disproportionately by women, such as trafficking and rape in war. They look for women in the institution and practices of global politics and observe how their presence affects and is affected by international policy making. Marxist socialist or critical Feminist critical theory has roots in Gramscian Marxism. It explores both the ideational and material manifestation of gendered identities and gendered power in global politics. Sandra Whitworth is a feminist critical theorist. In her book Feminism and International Relations, she claims that understanding gender depends only in part on the material conditions of women and men in particular circumstances. As for feminist social constructivism, feminist constructivism builds on social constructivism, study the process whereby ideas about gender influence global politics as well as the ways that global politics shapes ideas about gender. Since most home-based workers are women, the debate about regulating this type of employment is an important one for feminists. Cons- Post-colonial feminism. Post-colonialists focus on colonial relations of domination and subordination established under European imperialism in the 18th and 19th century. Postcolonialists claim that these dominance relationships persist and that they are built in the way Western knowledge portrays people and countries in the South today. Uh, Just as feminists in general have criticized Western knowledge for being knowledge constructed mainly from men's lives, post-colonial feminists see similar problems arising from feminist knowledge that is based largely on the experience of relatively privileged Western women. Postmodern feminism conception of feminism places overt emphasis upon gender differences between women and men whilst ignoring the differences within each gender. Classic gender role stereotype. We stereotype women as just typically feminist. They should be polite, accommodating, just like I said a while ago. Uh, the characteristic of women, such as weakness, dependence, or connection, emotionality, and private, are associated with femininity. Uh, we we stereotype men that they should be strong, aggressive, and bold. And just like I said earlier, a real man supposed to be they have such a characteristic of power, autonomy, rationality, and public. That's how we stereotype these two gender roles. Reality, according to a 2000 study, men are 77 higher risk of dying in car accident than women. What can you say about that, second reporter?
If we say that sa study is mas mas maraming na aksidente na mga driver na lalaki kaysa sa babae. Kasi yung babae is mas careful sila mag-drive kaysa sa mga lalaki. So yun yung na-show sa study na men are 77% higher risk of dying in a car accident than women.
Okay, thank you. Uh, what is gender? As I said before, social or culture construction. Uh, they are that define what we mean by masculinity and femininity. Gender is a system, social hierarchy in which masculine characteristics are valued than feminine ones. This is a structure that signifies an equal power relationship between men and women. Like sa power, autonomy, rationality, public, we stereotype it as a masculinity. Weakness, dependence, emotionality, and private, we stereotype it as a feminine. Masculinity and femininity are rational. Gender characteristics are generally an equal positive value ascribed to masculine characteristic. And as I said earlier, uh, we it is unequal for them because masculinity is the is the is a, international politics is a masculine world. They it is particularly important to pay attention to various forms of masculinity that are often used to legitimate states, foreign and military policies. And best example of that is Duterte. We like his kamay na bakal. Yeah. Feminist question for I mean. Where are the women in position of political leadership? Women demonstrate political leadership by working across party lines through parliamentary women's causes, even in the most politically combative environments, and by championing issues of gender equality such as elimination of gender-based violence, parental leave and childcare, pensions, gender equality laws. Um, Women, when they become leaders, they bring talents, new views alongside structural and cultural diversity to the companies they work for, resulting in more successful solutions. Women can study more minor details to see what is going on underneath the surface with diverse views and sense of awareness. As for military leadership, in today's modern warfare, women are serving as platoon leaders, company commanders, intelligence personnel, civil military operation practitioners, pilots, and even as members of special operation units. Indeed, the women are successfully breaking the barriers of gender stereotype. How are the types of power necessary to keep unequal gender structures in place perpetuated? To answer this question, these gender roles tends to perpetuate the power inequalities that they are based on. For example, the fact that many men and women think it's not natural for women to speak up in public often poses a key barrier to women access to decision making. Power equals masculinity also helps explain why powerful people often demonstrate dominance gendered ways. As I said before, uh, we think that power is about masculine world, and it's also one of the characteristic of masculinity. And does it make any difference to state policy practices that their foreign and security policies are often legitimated through appeals to various types of masculinity? It is particularly important to pay attention to various forms of masculinity that are often used to legitimate states' foreign and military policies. For example, characteristics as power, autonomy, and rationality, which we have identified as masculine, are also characteristics that are most valued in states' foreign policies. But gender is about more than personal characteristics, since as we have seen, gender characteristics are generally unequal, meaning that people of both sexes ascribe more positive value to the masculine ones. Gender is also a structure of meaning that signifies power relationship. If gender characteristics denote inequality, gender becomes a mechanism for the unequal distribution of social benefits and costs. Therefore, gender is crucial for analyzing global politics and economics, particularly with respect to issues of inequality, insecurity, and social justice. Feminists believe that they need to make an equal gender structure visible in order to move beyond them. Myth of protection. We often think of men as protectors and women and children as people who need protection. Uh, One of the stories that has been told throughout history is that men fight wars to protect women and children. The high number of civilian casualties in contemporary wars, about 90% of total casualties, suggests that we should be questioning this story. Uh, as we know, talagang mga lalaki talaga yung mga sumasabak sa giyera, sa mga sa ano pa, and even beyond in history, like we know Mulan, she hides his identity as a woman, and she changed them into a man so that para lang ma para ma ano para ma sa tagatungkol niya para ma
Para
dili,
sa army, ano siya sa army.
para kuan niya para no? Para i-change niya hindi kasi pinapapasok yung mga babae which is yung mga lalaki lang dapat, so parang siya na yung nag-change sa kanyang papa, yun. Women and children constitute about half the world's refugees population. When women, often acting as heads of the house, are forced into refugee camps, their vulnerability and that of their children increases. Strong connection between masculinity and war, focus on physical capabilities or threat thereof. It means that yung mga physical attributes ng mga lalaki is much more powerful compared to women. As we said before, women constitutions are mostly built for soft, and men as hard, just like yin and yang. Feminist approach, diminution of all forms of violence, and bottom up. Since we have seen national security can be tension with individual security, feminists prefer to define security broadly as the diminution of all forms of violence, including physical, economic, and ecological. They suggest that we think about security from the bottom up instead of from the top down, meaning that we start with the security of individual or community rather than with that of the state or the international system. This allows us to examine critically the role of states as adequate security providers. In certain states torn by conflict, the more the government is preoccupied with national security, the less its citizens, especially women, experience physical security. While state violence is a particular problem in certain states, many states formally at peace sustain huge military budget. At the same time, that social spending on which women depend more than men is being cut. Women disproportionately at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale. There are enormous differences in the socioeconomic status of women depending on their race, class, nationality, and geographic location. Nevertheless, women are disproportionately located at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale in all societies. On average, women earn two-thirds of men's earning even though they work longer hours, many of which are spent in unremunerated reproductive and caring tasks. Even when women and do rise to the top, they almost always earn less than men. Much work not considered gainful employment. Housewife versus breadwinner. The term housewife, which began to be used to describe women's work in the private domestic sphere, reinforce the gender dimension of this split. Gendered constructs such as breadwinner and housewife have been central to modern Western definition of masculinity, femininity, and capitalism. Even though many women do work outside the home for wages, the association of women with domestic roles such as housewife and caregiver has become institutionalized and even naturalized. This means that it is seen as natural for women to do the domestic work, putting the burden of household labor on women reduces their autonomy and economic security. For example, mga OFW natin. Di ba alam naman natin mga OFW is mostly is mga babae kasi yung yung mga trabaho na ina-apply nila is mostly domestic lang din or caregiving or as caregiver. And men, they just work for us to provide security to their family. Push into lower paid occupation. As a result of this role expectation, when women do enter the workforce, they are disproportionately represented in the caring professions such as nursing, social services, and primary education, or in light industry performed with light machinery. Women choose this occupation not on the basis of market rationality and profit maximization alone, but also because of values and expectation about mothers and caregivers that are emphasized in the socialization of young girls. Occupation that are disproportionately populated by women tend to be the most poorly paid. Assumptions about uh, appropriate gender roles means that women are often characterized as supplemental wage earners to the male head of household, but sometimes suggest that one-third of all households worldwide are headed by women. In fact, frequently obscured by role expectation that derive from the notion of male breadwinners and female housewives. Corporations take advantage of servant gender role to lower wages. Gender expectation about appropriate roles for women contribute to low wages and double burdens. Women cheap labor is particularly predominant in textile and electronics. These industries favor hiring young unmarried women who can achieve a high level of productivity at low wages frequently, and they are fired if they are get married or pregnant. Because of expectation associated with traditional gender roles, there is a belief that women possess nimble fingers, have patience for tedious jobs, and are naturally good sewers. When women are seen as natural good at this task, it means that these kinds of work are not seen as skilled and are remunerated accordingly. Moreover, political activity does not go with female responsibility. So that's all for this module.